Welcome again to the Hero Podcast 64. My name is Ryan G from the Netherlands with, of course, the real Pete Kirkwood. Pete, what are we talking about?
Well, Ryan, today I thought I'm just in a fun mood, having a great day. Let's talk about some fun stuff. When it comes to heroes, I think some of our favorite heroes have got to be superheroes. We all love a good superhero, and with superheroes comes superpowers. So today I thought we'd talk a little bit about superpowers, what we love, what we don't love, what we think's awesome, what we think's not so awesome, and just what powers and things are out there. There's so many superpowers because there's just as many as you can imagine. I mean, I really love the how would I say, unconventional powers. Being able to fly, super strength. They're real cliche. Indestructible, immortal, shoot lasers from the eyes. It's still quite cliche. But it's like I saw an anime just the other day where one of these guys had the power of moving arrows, and he could move arrows through the air. If you were touched by an arrow, it would pick you up with its force and throw you across the room.
I believe you're talking about Vector.
Vector? What? Maybe that I didn't catch the guy's name. Possibly. He seemed like a minor character who was defeated by the end of the episode, but it wouldn't surprise me if more than one person has the power. And see, that's the thing, is straight away you're like, oh, this is something I love about superpowers. As soon as you hear about one, oh, that's like that other power that reminds me of. One of my favorite, I guess you'd call it a web novel, is it's a story called Worm, WORM. And it starts out very simply with a teenage girl getting superpowers, and they seem to be kind of lame. She can control bugs, which is kind of gross. She's a girl, having cockroaches crawling around does not sound like a fun superpower. But it's one of those really cool superpowers because controlling bugs is so powerful. There are hundreds of different kinds of bugs with different kinds of abilities and powers and techniques. And what happens when you get flies to carry spiders that dangle silk in the thousands? You can fly nets around. Like, that's not what you think when you think control bugs. You don't think flying nets. But this kind of shit is possible when you start getting outside the box. So my favorite kind of superpowers are the ones which you can be creative with and come up with some really interesting. Because the thing that really jumps out to me when we're talking superpowers, brute strength and superpower flying and lasers out of the eyes and stuff, they're all cool. But that creative stuff, that out of the box, how you can use bugs to create nets, or like Deadpool does crazy shit all the time where he'll cut his own hand off to achieve something. He's thinking outside the box using his super healing. I think those are the coolest kinds of powers, the best kinds of uses, when we can use not just the superpower, but how creatively we use that. What are your kind of powers that you love and love to see interacted with, right?
Well, thank you, Pete. What I would like to see would have a lot to do with the concept of dilemmas, the pros and cons of a superpower within the story being told. For instance, I very much like the idea of teleportation or having a shadow as a weapon. Why? Because it's very subtle, it's unexpected, and you don't per se have to master it to be already effective. However, as the dilemmas pop up, you start to see, oh, the pros are clear, but where does the power break? Or where does the power become extremely disadvantaged? And how would a superhero or the antagonist or whatever person proact to the situation? Will he be scared? Will he panic? And here's where the character becomes more important than the superpower itself. Because if you would give, the region Deadpool versus Wolverine have very similar powers when it comes to their regenerative abilities, but the characters is what dictates the use of it.
Absolutely.
So imagine how I would use the power of teleportation would be far different to how you would use it. I mean, I would use it primarily for the convenience of it. However, yeah, let's be honest, I would. I mean, if I can blitz or blip into another place like I don't know the supermarket just to get some groceries, maybe not have to pay, I would.
I think we all would, like the Nightcrawler style thing. But
Yeah,
teleportation's a good one because you can use that to play a joke with people. You can
of
very easily
course.
switch and move things around. And I know you would do that.
Absolutely. I would have uh especially because although I don't like to admit it, I love a good prank. I love a good joke. The temptation would be there, and it's in one knowing when it's appropriate to do a prank and when not is where the
Totally.
character tends to evolve because I still would like to be, the likable superhero, the mischievous superhero, but I don't want to be a complete dick about it.
That makes sense, Like I get it. And if anyone listening is a big, huge fan of pranks, totally send them Ryan's way, not my way.
Fair
You can test
enough.
them with him.
Why you gotta be a dick about it? uh,
Oh, you started it, brother. But no, I get what you're saying. It is that like it's that constant. It's not just the powers themselves. You make up a good point. It's the characters behind them. It's the context of the story and the things that drive it. Why do you need to get a whole bunch of bugs together to weave a silk net? Well, because the person is electric. You touch them and you get fried. So you can't just jujitsu them into a chokehold. It's what brings about that need for creativity, I think, is really important to the story. And you raise a very interesting point about the differences because the weaknesses really make the power and make the story sometimes as well. Because wind, rain, these are not things which really seem to stop a superhero. But when your power is using bugs, well, there's only so much wind and rain bugs can handle.
yeah.
And if we're fighting someone who's really using wind and rain as a superpower, well, we've all seen people blown around by hurricanes. So, like, at the end of the day, it's all on a sliding scale of power and context, which I think is why superpowers always create such a rich storytelling environment. You know what I'm saying?
I get what you're saying. I get what you're saying. It reminds me
Like, I
of,
think,
yeah.
go for it.
So it reminds me of those mid-tier superheroes like
Mm-hmm.
Iron Fist and the such. I mean, they're not, let's say, a Spider-Man character where I would judge them if I would judge them based on their superpowers. Let's be fair, Spider-Man's superpower is kind of mid-tier. However, if you compare it to, what's this indestructible guy's name? I keep forgetting. I mean, you can't hurt him. I keep forgetting his
There's a
name, but
few.
there's a lot. There's a lot.
Juggernaut, Colossus, um, which franchise? The Hulk?
It is the Marvel franchise. I believe he works together with Iron Fist. He's a black dude.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. And like people shoot him and everything, and he doesn't care.
Yeah.
Cage.
Cage. Exactly.
Yes.
Indestructibility in the hands of a character like Spider-Man
Mm.
would be applied so much different than the same superpower applied to a character like Cage because of the context within the story that's told. Spider-Man is a combination of a redemption story because Uncle Ben got killed. He has to prove that he has the strength of character to use his power, and that has led him to these fantastical adventures. Whereas I'm not too familiar with the story of Cage, but from what I have seen, is he just wants to live a peaceful life, very similar to what Wolverine does, where he has been through the hero arc and now he needs to have time off,
Mm.
doing approaching his life through small petty crimes and making sure his neighborhood is peaceful. Whereas Spider-Man
See,
takes
and it's interesting you mentioned that about the like it's like the level of conflict that they're drawn into because in Spider-Man Homecoming, that's something that's really touched on is being the friendly neighborhood Spider-Man, and Spider-Man wants to be the Avenger Save the World Spider-Man. He doesn't want to be a friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. But you see, there's an interesting level of powers there because the web shooters, depending on which piece of Spider-Man which like source material you go to, sometimes he can shoot it from himself, sometimes it's a technological advancement, whatever. Um, but his indestructibility and his toughness and his resilience, like I always remember that scene where I think we've done it more than once, where he's in front of a train and he shoots all the webs out to the side and he's like holding the train and he's like trying
yep,
to hold it together. And it's not just the strength on his webs, it's that strength on him having to hold that stress together. The scene where he does it with the train, Tobey Maguire with the ship in Spider-Man Homecoming, trying to tie it together. He's 98% successful, which is not 100, and the thing falls apart. But it's those challenges where you see his resilience pushed and these secondary powers. Like when we think Spider-Man, we think web slinging, we think swinging around and all that kind of like that's what comes to mind. But it's actually his resilience is his power, and we miss these underlying really key powers. It's like the Flash, for example.
yep,
Running at super speed all over the place, he has to be super durable or he'd just fly apart.
of course.
And I think a lot of the time, what separates those top tier heroes from those mid tier heroes is combination of those sort of latent powers which back up the flashier powers and the story that they find themselves within and the context and the character. Because Wolverine could very easily be a mid-tier hero if people would leave him alone, but no one ever does.
No
So
one ever
he's
does.
constantly escalated to a high-level conflict by everything, by the universe around him, which is a very, it's a good point. I think if anyone listening to this has any favorite heroes, superpowers that jump out for you, where that combination is just fascinating and you see something super cool about it, drop it in the comments. Like I've so far loved the feedback we've had on some of these podcasts about the issues we've discussed and the conversations I've had with people because of it. That's really why I wanted to get into superpower and fun superpowers. The funnest of the fun stuff. And speaking of fun superpowers, you can pick any superpower and any sub-superpowers that have to go with it so you can survive. For example, durability to lightning speed for the Flash. But Ryan, if you had to pick one superpower, what would it be?
One. Hmm. Initially, I was going to go for teleportation. However, now I'm taking back and looking at it from parallel thinking, meaning
Parallel
such
thinking?
parallel thinking, meaning within whatever scenario, my mind works so fast that I've already calculated the steps that needed to be taken. Meaning, it doesn't matter how fast the Flash moves, no matter how strong my opponent is, the matter has already been done. I'm simply executing. It is it's like the idea of having a supercomputer in my mind. And before anything has happened, I already know what just happened, what is going to
Almost
happen. Almost
like
having
precognition.
foresight, precognition indeed, but precognition with a battle plan. Like in that instant, I use it. It's over for whoever decides to interact with me in whatever way.
Gotcha.
So even if it's like, I don't know, what's his name again? A Cage trying to punch me, I know I'm not gonna hurt him. So the obvious thing is fucking you to flip the guy, and evacuate the situation as fast as possible. And if possible, de-escalate. Meaning,
I
I
see where
would
you're coming
never,
from.
I would never
It's
be an S rank hero. However, I'm not gonna have the problems the S rank heroes tend to deal with.
Well, technically, you are an S rank hero, but you can't be a main character because you're almost a Mary Sue. Your power is almost to never be defeated.
Yep.
So either you need to be playing with some seriously powerful individuals who have similar level capabilities to get into a Xanatos Gambit pileup, which if anyone here is a TV tropes reader, look up the Xanatos Gambit. You'll be fascinated. And this is where that mind thing's going, because we're both thinking the same direction. That being one step ahead of the game. You know, I think of characters like Pride, who has the all-seeing eye, who can see your moves into the future. And the other one that I was literally thinking of just escaped me, but they saw your moves into the future as well, so you could never defeat them. But that's that level of precognition. It's fascinating you bring that up because you said teleportation, you went to precog. I was thinking in terms of some of the more flexible mind ones and team-based social powers, things that bring unity to groups of people and that kind of stuff. That's where I was leaning. And then I thought, no, actually, I prefer dimensional splitting precognition, which is very similar. It's like in the moment, time freezes and you see every possible dimension unfold in front of you. And as a precognition, you can play out each scenario. And then you go, we'll take that path. We'll take that path. We'll take that path, that path. And you choose them as they lay out.
Interesting. How would this relate to the real
Almost,
world, by the way, are of course thoughts that are coming up.
oh, how would this relate to the real world? Wow. It's funny enough, actually, because precog powers seem the most unrealistic, right? You want to be Superman? Well, you can don a suit of hydraulics that has a jetpack on the back, and you can throw cars, and you can fly. You know, you can build a robot around you to be Superman. Easy. How can you see the future? Well, if you ask any of my mates who love their day trading on Wall Street, they probably claim that they can. But it comes down to a analysis of analytics and statistics. You almost lead into that direction of precognition with your specialties in business. And I guess I'm not going to claim I'm the best at the world at it, but that ability to think through all of the possible consequences of certain actions in a scenario and to map out, if I do this, what will happen, A, B, C, and D, what are the likelihoods, what are the chances and the percentages, and calculate that in a social setting around me is often how I view the world, especially in a tricky situation where somebody's offended somebody and there's 5 different people with their emotions charged and you're in a room and you're seconds away from breakups and fights and things breaking out. You've really got to look forward into the consequences of your actions before you start acting to make sure you're making those right moves. And that's something I sort of pride myself on to the level I do it. But I would be a fool to think that other human beings don't always do that too, to some degree. We always think about the consequences of our actions to some degree. Maybe we're not right and maybe we're not good at it, but if I do that, A or B will happen. I want A or B to happen or don't want blah, blah, blah. I will or won't do it. We're all like that. And it's almost like superpowers are a fantasy of powers we do have in real life. So what you can do in real life, the superpower is like the fantasy. So birds can already fly. The superpower of flight is the fantasy that we can do it too. And the jet plane and the jetpack is the reality of us achieving the fantasy. Super strength, you can look at a rhino. Rhino can just charge through trees and things like that with no worry, just push them out the way. We dream of having that strength. Well, you create a bulldozer and all of a sudden you can.
I mean, the Wright brothers is a fantastic example of that.
Exactly. They had the dream, the Wright brothers, to create the plane, to create that power. I think one of the reasons I love getting into anything with powers and the rest of this because I see how it applies. I've seen stories with people who are skilled hypnotists that can say anything and they can weave magic spells in their words like magicians to create crazy effects on people's minds and realities and things like that. And that really does exist in the world. There are preachers out there like Ghafoerkhan who can just completely transform where people are emotionally and spiritually with his energy and the way he speaks. Those people really exist. Someone who's less of a religious figure in the same vein as someone like Tony Robbins. He does it from a completely atheist, a very technical point of view. It's about personal development. The opposite of language, numbers. Anyone who works on Wall Street calculating numbers and risk and profit and managing all that kind of stuff, you know, my accountant, he's fantastic for managing numbers. He's made a fortune in the markets, and I'm very fortunate to know him and have shared in some of that success. The thing I see, maybe it definitely sets me apart. It's definitely unique. In the real world, what would my power be? You know, if you're following along, think along these lines as well. In the real world, what would your power be? For me, it would be big on interacting with others. Yeah, I've got a little bit of looking into the future and using what I know to map out future potential reality, sure. But my real truth comes from looking into people and slowly finding what it is in them is magical, powerful, hidden, almost like a lost treasure within them. These skills and abilities and desires and ambitions, goals, dreams, and not just in terms of fantasy, but very real to them, very important needs that they can bring forth and they can manifest in their life, but maybe they haven't given themselves permission, or there was a invalidation by a parent or a guardian or a mentor or a colleague or themselves somewhere along the way, and they haven't quite come out of that chrysalis. They haven't quite managed to spread their wings. My power very much lies in helping those people heal in a way that allows them to open their wings and spread themselves and grow their power. I've looked at, just looking at my board over there and a bunch of my clients, to speak on them. There are men there who represent state-of-the-art machines, who represent kings of ages, who represent Shadow themselves, who represent innocence, love, power, determination, the immovable object, the unstoppable force, spiritual healers and holy warriors. It's just having a glance at the board. Those innate characters within us. We all have innate characters within us. And personally, it's finding it for me within people. That's what really I love to do. That's what my gifts are. That's where I work the best. And it's interesting because we almost seem very different. I'm a hero trainer. I train heroes. I work with people to train their heroic traits. You're a business optimization expert. Mm-hmm. You're a consultant for business. But a lot of I know we've done consultations. I know a lot of your powers similar to mine, but different. How would you say you have that same power, but differently to help people that I do in your case, Warren?
Well, if you would look at it from a storyline perspective, you would be the guru that specifically focus in on making the hero better. Making the hero better for a very specific purpose, or to make the hero better in general.
Totally.
I would be, let's say, the Deus Ex Machina, or the hired gun, or the stranger who you happen to meet on your way to the goal, to help you lubricate the mission, to help you get more perspective on getting the mission done faster. Maybe because I've already been through the process, or from the business optimization perspective, getting you the right tools, giving you better skills to get the job done. And of course, with that comes the character into play, and the character of the mercenary band um, with which the hero is associated, to make sure not only does the job get done, but that the job gets done the right way.
I think I see how, like when you said about that character who joins during the story, I think that's really interesting because I can see how with a lot of people I work with, we're talking about molding them so whatever they encounter, they'll be fine. Whereas I can picture someone, their goal is to climb to the top of this mountain, to go to this ancient temple, to do this ritual and blah, 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 blah. You might not necessarily know much about a ritual in a temple, but you know about climbing this mountain because you've climbed this mountain 500 times and you've done it with so many people. So you're the perfect guide because you know the terrain, but you can work with the person because you know, well, okay, so your strengths are you're really good at climbing, but you don't have a good carrying capacity. Okay, so we'll take this route instead versus if you were the opposite. I think that is a really powerful analogy because we all have powers and skills, and knowing where you can help someone with their journey, I think is absolutely key. So as that business optimizer, you make their journey better. It's almost like if you're going to climb Everest, you need a Sherpa. You're a fool without one.
Yeah, else
And
you will die.
totally, you will die. So I see how a lot of people with their business, with their passion, with their dream, they can spend a year training with me. But when they get to Everest to climb it, they're going to need the Sherpa. They're going to need you. I can set them up to go out and face the world, and I can be there when they come back to break it down and the rest of it. But in the trenches, you're more alongside people in the business optimization, doing the work with them. Whereas I help set them up for it. I'm not here to save them. I'm here to give them the tools to save themselves. You're there to do the job step by step, which is fascinating because I really see that distinction now that we lay it out. And I think that it really, we don't have much time left because superpowers is the kind of powers and things I could talk on forever, man. I can think of numbers, I can think of language, I can think of physical, spatial manipulations. We didn't even touch on anything like water bending, elemental stuff, nothing like that. Barely touched on psychic powers, the physical ones, all of that strength, all of that kind of stuff. Man, I look at that board, some of those guys on there literally represent that physical power massively. Even just as soon as I said it, I'm reminded of them. And I think that people need to spend some time daydreaming a little bit more about what kind of powers they want and what kind of powers they'd have fun with. And if they were that person with those powers, what would they do? Who are they really? What are the core values that make them? Because, yeah, there's a case for, depending upon which side you're on, our freedom fighters are your terrorists, our heroes are your villains. But there's a lot of villains that act with the code of a hero. It's just they're going against what somebody who happens to be living in that area might think is a good idea. They don't want to be displaced, so it's a villain. Whereas to the rest of the nation, it's a hero. I think people need to think on that. But also reach out. Like, talk to me about superpowers. I love these kind of conversations. I bet you do as well. When it comes down to 100%, right? When it comes down to discussing what really fires us up, business, personal. It's got to be fun. Otherwise, what the fuck are we doing life for? We've got to have the fun side of it. And I think that tying it into heroes and characters and things like that, we can take the grueling monotony of a training regime and a study regime to become a stronger man and a better person, like I do, which could just be boring personal development. But no, we do it from the hero's perspective. Or in your case, where you can change we're not just optimizing a business, we're doing it in a way that's heroic, that achieves an outcome that's far greater than the sum of its parts.
Correct. Indeed. Absolutely agree. Hmm. You gave me a lot to think about, Pete. I love it.
Oh, that means it's one of those podcasts where everyone's at the end thinking and not speaking. That means I must have said something profound. I love it.
But
Well,
we're at the end of the half an hour, so closing notes.
closing notes. Look, if you guys are enjoying our content, hit us up, send us messages on what you'd like to see. I've had some interesting suggestions, and for people who want to come and jump on this podcast as well, maybe get some feminine presence on here and see how that goes. We'll look into that. But also other ideas for what you want us to discuss in terms of heroism in real life, in personal life, in modern day life, in business, and anything related to that. Superpowers, regular powers, Austin powers, whatever it is, hit us up, talk to us. We're keen to have a conversation. I think that about wraps it up, right?
That wraps it up. My name is Ryan G with the real Pete Kirkwood. This has been the Hero Podcast 64. Thank you, and whenever you are, may your life never be the same. Good day.